Hello and welcome to the Relentless Investor Podcast. I am the host, Caleb Bryant, and I am the Relentless Investor. Today on the show, I have Michael Zuber, and he is an author. The book he wrote is One Rental at a Time, and he spends a lot of his time now giving back. So thank you so much for being on the show, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. I want to start just by letting you introduce yourself to the listeners here and where you're from and the basics of the story.
Excellent. So again, Michael Zuber. I live in the Silicon Valley. If you know it at all, it's specifically Mountain View, California, which is probably best known for housing Google. That's where Google's headquarters is in Mountain View. It's about a mile from where I live. I've always lived in the Silicon Valley, right? I lived in Sunnyvale, went to school at Clara University, and now live in Mountain View. So never really moved around much. But what that means for this story is I'm now 46. I worked in technology my whole life. I had a wake-up call when I was 30. Got to my 30th birthday. I don't know. You're not even 30 yet, so this is still in front of you. But what happened to me was I had a wake-up call on my 30th birthday because I was now making six figures. I had a sales job, which had even more upside. But I got to my 30th birthday and had nothing, right? Everything I made, I spent. So I read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. It literally, I felt like it slapped me across the face. I must have read it 5 or 6 times because I traveled. So I was on an airplane and that's what I did back then is read. And I realized I was being an idiot, a fool, wasteful, whatever you want to call it. And, in addition, what I did on my 30th birthday is I looked up, right? Because I was raised with, go to school, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder, and you're quote unquote successful. I wasn't until I was 30, I questioned that, right? So I have a college degree. I have a master's degree. I had been promoted several times by this point, but I looked up the corporate rung, probably 2 or 3 levels, to people who were my age now back then. And I realized that I didn't want to be them. They were all overweight. They were all on their 2nd or 3rd marriages. They were all, or at least mostly, addicted to some substance. And I wanted no part of that. Mm-hmm. So I made a assessment that I needed to get out of the rat race, right? The Rich Dad, Poor Dad book introduced me to that term. And I'm like, I don't want any of that. So if you've read the book or you haven't read the book, the basic key is buy and hold rentals, right? They talk about rental properties in there. That was my thing. So I'm like, okay, I want some of that. So I spent a year looking in the Silicon Valley because everybody says invest 30 minutes from home. Nothing has made sense where I live probably since the 70s. So, after a year, we buckled down. I remember sitting around the table with the wife going, okay, what do? We can either buy one overpriced asset or we could do somewhere else. So we decided to look elsewhere. We didn't want to get on the plane. So we ended up drawing circles around the California map. And we found the first market of Fresno, California, which is 2.5 hours from where we live, one way. That made sense. And we've been there ever since. So we grew a portfolio from a single house on Norris Drive to a portfolio of 175 doors, which is a mixture of houses and small apartments. And ultimately both retired. She left the workforce about 5 years ago. And I left back in February of 18. So all through buy and hold, landlord, conservatively financed stuff. That's me.
Wow. So many things hit me in that. First, last, I guess, was 175 units in California.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So if you're making excuses about California, you got to stop that. I know because I'm in Alabama and I deal with California investors all the time. Oh, it's too expensive. That's why that's why they talk to me. But the thing that really hit me in there was the looking up the rungs. So you said you looked a couple rungs up in the corporate ladder. And I remember doing this at a particular job, and I didn't last at this job very long because I knew instantly when I saw the way these people felt on a daily basis that I didn't want to feel like that. But same thing, it was a finance job over the phone. And overweight, they're constantly needing smoke breaks or taking Adderall or whatever it is. They had to have something just to calm their nerves, because it's 10 to 12 hours just going at it, and you got to make the sale and this and that. And while a lot of them were making a lot of money, they didn't look even reasonably happy, even low scale happy. And if they didn't have any time to enjoy the money they were even making. So that makes a lot of sense. And it's good that, and you said you saw that at 30.
Yeah, it was my 30th, right around my 30th birthday. I always assess 2 times a year. It's a personal thing I do. Once on my birthday, which is in the summer, and then once at Christmas, kind of the end of the year, which happened to be about 6 months apart. I'm always kind of self-evaluating and tuning and setting new goals. I'm a very goal-oriented person, which meant I was going to be really good at sales, or should be. So that's how I've led my life for decades.
Okay. And that's pretty cool. So you reevaluate twice a year. Is there a particular process you use to do this?
Well, I write down my goals. First and foremost, I believe in writing them down. I also believe in sharing them with everyone, which back in the day was just talking to your friends. Now I post them on Facebook and every month. Now, if you follow me on YouTube, I do goals. I shared my goals January 1st or December 31st. And now once a month, I tell you exactly how I do it. I use Excel because it just makes sense, right? You know, every row is a goal and every column's a month. And I self-assess. I like holding myself accountable, but I also I don't know if it's an example maybe that others could see. But I believe in the written goal. I believe in looking at it, like right over my camera are my goals. They're right in front of me every day. Yeah. So it's something I've been doing since college, frankly.
Amazing. So going way back to the first deal, and you said Fresno, right?
Yep. I did. Good memory.
So how did you go about doing that first deal?
So I still remember it was 1818 Norris Drive East 93703. If you want to look it up on Zillow. We had spent a year, as I shared, right, looking in the valley. And again, if you kind of rewind the clock to, what would this have been, like 2002, 2003, all the real estate investing books talked about the 1% rule. I don't use it today, but that's what I used then. And that was the first property we found that made it. So we were going to rent it for $10.95, and we bought it for $107. So we didn't. The other thing that's, I don't know if it's amazing now that I look back on it or whatever, is I had never been to Fresno. I knew no one in Fresno. It just happened to be the first market that offered the 1% rule. So we made some phone calls to agents just out of the MLS.
Yeah.
And ended up locking into one who happened to also be a property manager. So we drove down there not knowing anyone. He drove us around the city. He happened to own some property himself, so he showed us some of his. And then he showed us this is the only property that makes sense, given, because we shared with him our rule, right? 1%.
Yeah.
And we walk in. It's a 322. It probably needed 10 grand to work. And we're like, okay, great. Let's see the next one. He's like, no, you're not listening. This is the only thing that makes sense. Because the market was just starting to get hot in 03. It was kind of like 2016, right? It's kind of just peaking or starting the upward slant or slope. And so we get back in the car. First off, we're kind of disappointed. And then we're like, you know, because we've now spent 52 weeks now, 54 weeks or something looking for something. And I remember my wife looking at me going, all right, you've been talking about this 1% rule for at least 6 months. Are you going to do it? What are you going to do? So I made a bunch of excuses and blah, blah, blah. And she called me on my stuff. So we pulled over. I called him back and said, okay, write a full price offer. At the time we had a measly $40,000, which is more than some, but a lot less than others. We put 20% down, so roughly 20 grand, and we got a bank loan. I didn't know any different. I thought you always put 20% down. What do I know? But yes, we had our first property.
Wow.
On Norris Drive.
Awesome. And so you got it off the MLS in California.
It's funny. Like when you read the book, which I'll send you, we have bought 98% of our stuff out of the MLS because I didn't know any different. I had bought out of the MLS in California for 15 years.
Well, if that just goes to prove that it's possible to do it that way, because I mean, everybody does it a little bit different, but That's not a way I've ever even tried personally. I just use the MLS to like find areas. That's really
Yeah.
all I do, but that's awesome. So that was the
Yeah.
first.
So there's that story actually, it actually, it's an event in our lives that probably crushes most people. So we are ecstatic when we buy this, right? Right, we have a fancy dinner, we celebrate, we high five, right? We do what adults do. Then lo and behold, we get a tenant like right away. We're like, yeah, this works. They move in, pay 1095, credit checks out, jobs check out, landlord, everything, right? We do everything. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, the wife takes off, right? They end up getting divorced. She goes to Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, never to be heard from again. The husband does not appreciate this breakup very much. He ends up turning to alcohol to soothe his broken heart and decides to destroy our property and never pay rent again. So we're in California, so that's a 60-day eviction, best case.
Yeah, minimum.
Minimum, right? So we get them out in about 70 days. So we got deposit and 1 month's rent. We now lose 3 months, and when he leaves, we have $15,000 in repairs.
Okay, so I have a really easy follow-up question then. Why did you keep doing this? What did you that made you like get past that first obstacle?
Yeah, so it's a this 100% goes to my wife Olivia's credit. We look at each other and we have the logical question that most people have is like, do we want to do this again? Right? Because that's our first experience, right? We have never owned a rental. We don't know Fresno from Austin, Texas, right? We don't know anything. We still don't know anybody. And this happens. And she looks across and goes, that sucked, right? Basically. And, it's a cost of doing business. We knew this was possible. It really hurt that this was our first one, but let's keep going. And I got to tell you, 99% of the people I talked to would have sold that property as fast as possible, taken a loss, and never done it again. Thankfully, that property does have a happy ending. As you'll see, if you look on Zillow, we end up selling it like 2 years later for $263 and not sell it. We actually do a 1031 exchange into a 5-unit apartment building that we still own today that's been cash flowing like a monster. And of course, we go on to build a portfolio that allows us to retire. So we've had thousands of tenants by now, and we only have 2 stories like that, right? It sucks that it happened to be the first one. And then we had another one about a decade later in one of our apartment buildings. So bad stuff does happen. It's the 1% of the tenants, right? 98% of tenants are great. 1% of the tenants are hassles, and 1% of them are pearl evil. It just happened to be that first one had life events happen. This is a people business. I feel really bad for that couple. But we looked across each other, swallowed hard, and kept going, and really glad we did.
Yeah. So the grit that first one took is what really established some success for the future. But it sounds like you're someone that just is that way anyway, which is kind of So what type of, you had this problem and you decided to move forward. What kind of team building did you do in Fresno, and what did you do to avoid problems like this in the future? Because you have a ton of units now, and you said that's only happened twice. So you adjusted.
Yeah. So one of the big things you'll find, because again, I guess hopefully it's probably understood, but let's say it anyway. I've had a property manager since day one. Right. We're 2.5 hours away. I don't want to deal with tenants, toilets, trash, termites, all of that stuff. Right. I see my job as securing capital and finding deals. It's the only 2 things I'm good at. Everything else we outsource. Mm-hmm. Olivia does some of the books, checks and balances and stuff, but essentially we outsource everything else. So team building is vital, right? One of the hardest things as someone who invests out of area, and this, when I say out of area, it could mean out of state, right? Because it's 2.5 hours away. I mean, you can get a lot of places in 2.5 hours on an airplane. You have to be able to vet and trust your property manager, step one. So we actually went through 5 property managers in 5 years. What I have found is when you have to find a property manager who's the principal, meaning the owner, is an investor themselves. When you find a property manager who's main income is selling real estate, being a mortgage broker, maybe being a lender, and property manager is this kind of side business that keeps the lights on. My experience, and my experience only, that doesn't lead to long-term success because markets change. And when that segment gets hot where most of their income comes from, they're going to ignore property management. And we saw that happen. So I vetted people, we fired people, which was part of the business. And we really went on a network building binge, right? We tried to meet 3 to 5 new people every week. We asked for referrals. We tried to meet investors and agents and bankers and property managers. And we one of our main things besides looking for deals was meeting new people. And that was a week, again, I shared earlier my goals. We had a weekly goal of 3 people a week.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. I want to know, did you use the broker or the agent first as the property manager, or did you pick someone else entirely?
No, the one guy we want that did our search was a broker and an agent and a property manager. Again, we didn't know any different. We just threw them in. And again, they did everything right? They have a credit check. They did this, they did that. But what we found is we were growing and the market got hotter, right? The market from like in 06 was like 18, where it's just on fire.
Yeah.
Their focus diverted to selling real estate. And by that time we had 4 or 5 units and their focus on property management shifted. So we had to move on. They did everything. I don't give them any blame for that first situation. They did everything right. Just life happens, right? Family got divorced and wife took off. Not on them. I don't blame them an iota.
Yeah, you can't screen for that, really.
No, that's not a checkbox somewhere. Are you going to get divorced in the next 2 weeks? That wasn't on any application.
So, great. You're at 175 units now, and that's taken you about 15, 16 years.
Correct.
Did you see when the crash happened, what did that look like for you? Did you shift your strategy at all? Were you picking up properties or getting rid of them, or?
Yeah, so our strategy changed right at the peak, which again appears like we're geniuses, but trust me, we're not. But what happened is we had 8 doors at the time. We had 7 houses and a duplex, and we were trying to buy our 9th property. And again, I'm an idiot and a simple person. I was looking for another house because that's all I ever known, right? All I've ever lived in is a house. So that's all I ever thought about buying.
Yeah.
But we were now looking at properties like that Norris Drive example. They were now going for $263, but still renting for $1,100. And my financing brain could not do the math to make that cash flow. So we just couldn't buy a 9th. So I went to a local meetup in Fresno and somebody asked, hey, have you ever looked at commercial? And I, again, naively said, I don't want a shopping center. I don't want an office building. Because again, I don't know. He's like, oh, Michael, you're such a, you'll be okay. Right? Commercial can mean apartments. And I'm like, I don't want to own a big apartment. He goes, no, commercial means the financing. And that's 5 units and above. Have you ever looked there? I'm like, no, I haven't. So I was like, okay, well, thank you. So let's go do that. So again, why Norris Drive turns out to be a good story, even though it started badly, is if you look on Zillow, we sold it for $263 or $267 or whatever it is. But we did a 1031 exchange into a 5-unit building that we bought for $223. And the kicker is the 5-unit building rented for $3,000 and the house rented for $1,100.
Yes.
So you do the math, right? So we're simple. When something works, we do it again. So we sold all of our houses and we did 1031 exchanges. We went from 8 doors to 80 doors in about a year. And we put in no new capital. It was all exchange money.
Wow.
So that's what we did at the peak.
Wow.
And then the crash happens and we go, okay, great. Let's buy some stuff because now we're buying stuff for below what we paid, but we don't get any bank loans because we're the devil, right? If you were a real estate investor in like 2010 and you had 80 units, no bank wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because you were the problem, right? So we did hard money first a little bit, and then we did private money. We raised a bunch of private money, over $1 million, and we paid 10% on it, and we bought as much stuff as we could. The reason being is, again, all the books I read back in when I was 30, 31, 32, the Texas crisis around oil, the savings and loan crisis, all the quote unquote successful people said they wish they bought more. Mm-hmm. So we were destined or focused on not being that person. So I was willing to mortgage, get a loan on my car. I borrowed from my 401k. We did anything we could to raise capital, and we bought everything we could. So we went from about 80 to 150 units during the crash, mostly with private money in first position. And, we just kept buying and buying and buying until the hedge funds came in and the market changed. And, then now we look like geniuses because we own a lot of stuff that was bought for land value.
That's amazing. I like private money as well. We actually, my team uses private money to close multifamily deals still. So how did you go about finding these investors? Was that a difficult process during the crash to get people to lend money on real estate, or was it easier than you thought it would be?
It was actually so easy for me. I don't want it to sound arrogant, but it was. I was never even looking for it. I was comfortable using hard money. But basically what I've always been is a talker, and especially with something that I like. So I talk about real estate with everybody. And again, I happen to be running in circles where people made six figures.
Yeah.
And at the time, the banks were savings were earning less than 1%.
Yes.
So I was commiserating with some friends and family about paying 9%, 3 points, 40, all this stuff that hard money charges. And they're like, hey, I'll loan you. I'll give you some money. So then I had to go figure it out because I wanted to make sure I did it the right way. So I figured I knew nothing. So I figured out I could put them in first position. I could go get a note created by a lawyer. I could go through escrow, get them, I get them named on insurance, do all the right things. And then I just started documenting it. And then it just spread from there. Again, totally friends and family network, and people would reinvest and all that stuff. So I think if you document what you're doing, you treat investors the right way, you think about them first, you can do great things. I've used private money twice. Once then during the crash, and then since I've left the workforce, I use private money again. But now I make them my partners.
Yeah,
and I only pay 6% interest, but I give them 20% of the upside. I call it my 6 and 20 program. So again, I think if you put together something and you treat them right, you do it all through title companies and first position, I don't think it's hard, but you got to communicate a deal, right? I think private investors want to know you first, right? Are you a good person? What are you doing? What's your track record? So document it, share, give without expectation, and then understand the process, make sure it's good for them first, protect them first. And then, then it's not really that hard.
Wow. So I like that 20 and 6 thing. That is a new one for me. Is that like it's basically a joint venture then? Is that right?
Yeah, but they're not on title, right? So I still own the property. It's basically a 6 and 20 note.
Okay.
So I pay them 6% interest only during the hold. And then when I sell it, because I do this for my flips now that I've done since I've left, they get 20% of the upside. So I send them a detailed list of everything that cost in the expense, insurance, the interest payment. Then there's a net. Let's just say the net's 30 grand. When it sells, they get, $6,000, right? Which is 20% of the profit.
Boom. All right. I might try that. I might try that one out. So awesome.
Yeah, no, it works really well.
So this is the part of the show where I ask these questions to every guest. And
okay.
The first one is, what is a song that motivates you?
Oh my gosh. A song that motivates me. So again, right, I'm older than you. I happen to like hip hop music. So a song that motivates me. There's a lot. What would I put on? So I guess just last night, there's an old rap guy named Sir Mix-a-Lot, and he has a song called Cars, C-A-R-Z. And the song's basically about fancy cars. I don't own a fancy car, but it's fun to look at and sing to. So it's like a 5-minute song. So that's what I listened to last night. Yeah, that was the fun one. That goes way back. That was like 97, I think.
Fun to listen to on the way to Cars and Coffee, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll have to check that one out. I haven't heard it. What is an example?
C-A-R-Z. Yeah.
C-A-R-Z. What is an example of when being relentless benefited your business? And you've already said a few, but reiterate on one that sticks out.
Gosh, Relentless. Again, I see Relentless as being something when you make a decision, you just keep going. You could see Relentless throughout our story, whether it's that Norris Drive story with the decision to go get our second property, right? Not many people would do that. That's definitely a definition of Relentless. Staying focused on a market where you know no one, never been there, going forward. Continuing to grow your portfolio or finding a way to go forward when your model's broken, right? Because our model broke in '08, right? We could not buy a house and make it cash flow. So we had to figure something out. I mean, there's across our career in investing, we have been relentless and we stay that way, right? We lean that direction all the time. So that's what kind of caught my attention when I saw some of your posts.
Well, awesome. I was going to say, hearing your story, I was like, this question's already answered, but we'll ask it anyway.
There you go.
If you could only recommend one book to anyone for the rest of your life, what book would it be?
Well, I would love to say mine, but I won't. It would have to be Rich Dad Poor Dad. And again, any book that shook me to my core that I had to read 5 times in a row, it's only happened once. I've read a few books twice, but never in a row. And again, it's not a well-written book, right? It's kind of structurally off and all of that, but it shook me to my core, and it deserves the credit it deserves. So Rich Dad Poor Dad from Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah, I love that book too. It convinced me to sell my Mercedes, which is not why I love it.
Toys are bad.
It helped me figure out that I just needed to put that money in assets first, and then I can go buy it again once it's getting paid for.
Exactly.
How do you like to give back?
Oh, that's pretty much all I do now. So the story here is I retire at 45. Basically, and again, we don't retire like we're driving in Ferraris and Lambos and all that. We live very modest lives. If you were to look at us, we're not flashy, but on the first of the month, all of our bills are paid for, which is what Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about. It's where we got, right? And again, we don't live extravagantly, but now we have time. So I decided to retire February 1st of 18. I spent 2 days looking like the Joker and the Batman, which I relate to that big smile on his face. I had never smiled so hard or so long that my face hurt.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me for about 48 hours. Because everybody I talked to, I would just reiterate the story, right? But then I went into a nasty, I now call it a depression. I didn't know what to call it back then because I'm always a glass half full positive person throughout my entire life. But I had about a 6-week period where every day was darker than the day before. And what it all boiled down to was I was still relatively young. I still was very type A, and I wasn't feeling like I was contributing.
Yeah.
So after about 6 weeks of every day being worse than the day before, I had to make a choice. Either go back and get a job because I was going to end up killing myself or something horrible, or I could find a way to give back. And for me, giving back felt right. So I spent 8 weeks or so writing a book, which you see behind me, called One Rental at a Time, and you referenced, which is our story of 15 years and, advice and mistakes and all that stuff. It's just it's as close to an autobiography that I could write. I'm not a great student. I got through with C's, and English was my worst subject. So it is what it is. But I now I also created a YouTube channel. Guess what? Called One Rental at a Time. So I have been posting daily videos for almost 6 months now, and I spend at least 90 minutes a day on that. And that's how I give back now. So I wrote a book. It's on Amazon. People say they like it. It's got 56 or 7 5-star reviews, which I'm really proud of. People take selfies with it and send it to me, which make me smile. And check me out on YouTube. I again, One Rental at a Time. I post daily videos. And again, your interview will be tomorrow's content.
I was just on his show. So for anyone,
this is give back.
Yep. I love it.
So that's what I do.
How can listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way to do it is go to my YouTube channel, One Rental at a Time. I post my email there. For here, it's Zuber, my last name, Zuber, at One Rental at a Time. I am spinning up a web page. Again, I'm not a social media savant. I don't really know what I'm doing half the time. I
Me
just talk to the camera. I just don't get it. But yeah, I'm generally trying to help, and you can go vet me, check me out. There's now, I bet you there's 400 videos there now. So there's plenty of stuff where you can go, is this guy full of blank or is he authentic? So, um, that's where I would go.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Michael, so much for hopping on the show and telling your story. I think you brought a lot of really good tips that actually I'm going to implement. So when I'm editing this, I'm going to take notes as well. Way I can make sure I'm putting some of these into action. Thanks again, and we will talk soon.
You got it.